In this lesson, we're going to talk about the interview question that asks, tell me about a time where you had a disagreement with another team member. Or the question might be, tell me about a time where you had a disagreement with your boss. Or what would you do if your boss disagreed with you on a decision? If you haven't already watched the previous lesson on how to deal with a conflict, I suggest that you watch that lesson first before watching this lesson. But if it's a disagreement with another team member, I think that the framework for answering it is very similar to how you deal with a conflict. Not that there is always a conflict in the case of a disagreement, but a disagreement is to me is just a lighter version of a conflict. And the structure in answering a disagreement question or a conflict question with another team member is very similar. You have to really understand their perspectives, where they come from. You need to make sure that you can communicate your perspective, and sometimes that's enough, and one side realizes the importance of the other side's perspective, and they'll try to figure out a way to make it work. And you also sometimes need to explain, when you explain your perspective, you need to basically go details and explain how you think that your approach is going to address their concerns, or you say that, hey, this is going to be addressed over time, and here's our roadmap to addressing them, or here's why we think that at the moment we have the right, we have to make this trade-off, and the company's priority is doing what I'm suggesting, while kind of accepting with the consequences that are your concern. Now, in some cases, that's not enough. You actually have to look for a new approach in dealing with the problem that you have in front of you, and you need to solve it in a way that makes your counterparty satisfied. And if that still doesn't work, you need to basically engage a higher level manager to figure out what's the higher priority. Is it your approach or their concern? This is really for having a disagreements with another team member, and like I said, is very similar to how you deal with a conflict with another team member. I think they're very similar. The second type of interview question here that could be asked is, tell me about a time where you disagreed with your boss. And here, what's important is that at the end of the day, you should remember that you're reporting to your boss that has a higher authority than you, and it's their final decision that you have to go with. But it's really important to kind of explain how you can end up in that situation, and how you can help them make the right decision. The way I like to answer this question is to follow the framework that is similar to dealing with another team member in a disagreement at the beginning. But the difference would be that to realize that if they're still not convinced in your approach, and they insist on taking their approach, you provide them with the information that they need to make the right decision. So that's really become the job of you as their direct report, to help them make the final decision while having all the information. And the example that I give here is about my previous job, where the CEO of the company that I reported to asked me to build a functionality that enabled electronic signature of purchasing a financial product that we were offering online. And I did some investigation and realized that even though it seemed like an easy thing to build, it had a lot of edge cases which made the product, basically building that feature, 10 times more complex than it seemed like. Sometimes you had multiple people signing, sometimes you had lawyers involved, and there's like all kinds of other edge cases, like one person wanted to use computers, one person just wanted to use paper. But the CEO insisted that it was easy to build and kept asking, why can't we just let people sign their documents electronically? So the way I dealt with this was that I put together a table that showed all the different edge cases that we needed to support for the particular target market that we were in, and the probability that we would hit each of them based on our historical information, what we know about our market. And then I provided an estimate of the effort to support each of the edge cases. And I provided also an alternative path of initially letting users download the file on their computer, print it, sign it, scan it, upload it. And the alternative path would allow us to also develop additional critical features within the same time frame that we were looking into building the electronic signature. So the CEO really had really good information about the two options in front of him, how much work was involved in doing electronic versus doing it a little bit more manual for now and eventually doing it electronic, and what was involved in doing it electronic and why it took so long. So then he agreed that electronic signature was not a big problem at the moment, given everything else that we wanted to prioritize. And I think the key learning here is that instead of arguing with the hiring manager or the CEO and not listening to them, I tried to provide the information that explained the thinking behind why a particular path is not viable and provided an alternative path and let them make the final decision. And this basically helps you address these kinds of situations without creating any conflict or any challenges in your relationship with your managers or your with the CEO of the company.